Hey Alan, hey Thomas, thanks for being here. Alan, we've been working together for quite a long time, 4 or 5 years I think, on El Carmen, our decaf that we sourced through raw material. But we're here today to talk about a different coffee, that's Elox from Mexico. So Alan, if you could maybe quickly start by introducing raw material.
I'm Alan from Raw Material. Raw Material is a social enterprise. We work as both an exporter and importer of green coffees from 5 coffee-producing countries. Those would be Colombia, where we work together with El Carmen, Burundi, Rwanda, Timor-Leste, and Mexico. We're a non-profit who works exclusively with groups of smallholder coffee producers, and we work to help those groups access the benefits of the specialty coffee market, hopefully to help them consolidate more coffee to produce more coffees, produce coffees of a higher value, and to connect them with the buyers for those coffees. And 100% of the profits that we generate go to the coffee producing communities that we work with. In Colombia, Burundi, and Timor-Leste, we have our own origin operations where we are actively purchasing and processing coffees and exporting coffees. And then in Rwanda and Mexico, we work with very closely aligned partner exporters. And in the case of Mexico, that would be Thomas and Red Beetle Coffee Lab, who we've been working with in Oaxaca and Chiapas since 2020.
Can you give us some background on coffee production in Mexico and maybe specifically Oaxaca?
Mexico, traditionally has been a relatively large coffee producer, but more of a more conventional quality, like larger cooperatives producing fair trade organic certified coffees around maybe 82, 83 points that are not necessarily the kind of coffees sought by the specialty coffee market. But then more recently, thanks to the work of companies like Red Beetle Coffee Lab, we've been able to discover that there are coffees of a significantly higher quality being grown in Mexico, specifically in certain regions. Oaxaca being one of the main ones, and maybe the region best known for quality in Mexico. It's an origin that I personally, in my coffee career, have had a lot of experience with and have a great affinity for Mexican coffees. And then in our work with Raw Material, with the idea to work with smallholder producers who have incredible coffees that can have large and important economic impact for the producers if they can connect to the specialty coffee market. We felt is very much Mexico and Oaxaca specifically is an origin where these coffee producers and their coffees, we could represent them very well in the market and could be very appealing to our producers. So based on a prior relationship with Red Beetle as well and with Thomas and with his partners, we started to work together to try and find a market for some of these coffees and bring more of them to Europe and the UK.
You've done this before. So why did you decide to focus on Mexico and what is the long-term goal there?
So we began to look at Mexico and to focus there because we know that the quality for coffee is there, it can be found. But the challenge, especially for smallholder producers there, is really one of incredibly low yields. The average coffee trees, especially in Oaxaca, are very old and very unproductive. The average producer only has a very small farm as well, I think around 1 hectare in size. That is only 1 hectare in Colombia could produce several tons of parchment perhaps, but 1 hectare, the average in Oaxaca would produce maybe 1 or 2 bags of exportable coffee. It's a very, very low yield. And so no matter how good the coffee is, no matter how great of a price we can pay for the coffee, if you only have 200 kilos of green coffee, it's never going to have a dramatic impact. But because the quality of the coffee is there, because the systems are in place and we believe the market is there, the idea is if we can connect better buyers that want to invest on the long run, support these producers with good prices, not only can that limited quantity become more profitable in the short term, in the long term, that should allow us to make investments in the communities that can help to produce more coffee and produce coffee even of a higher quality and a higher value as well.
Thomas, I know you pay, the way you pay producers is structured in 2 installments. There's a first installment, which is market price, and then there's a second payment, which is more linked to the quality. Can you explain us how that works and how you try to maximize the quality part of the price for each individual producer?
One of the reasons why we actually decided to work in Mexico, apart from a very strong personal connection, was that there is hundreds of thousands of producers in Mexico, similar amount actually to Colombia. But they don't receive the same technical assistance and they don't have the same access to a better market paying higher prices than producers in many other countries. It's a market that is still very coyote or intermediary driven, meaning it's very remote communities and intermediaries go and pay the coffee cash. The problem is it's usually a very low price, depending on the market price, but it's usually very low. There is no premiums for quality. And all the coffee from those communities, usually regardless of the quality or the humidity, gets blended up. And that was very clear that was a very restrictive and limiting factor to those producers, because they were stuck in that loop, because they had no access to either. Many of them produced great coffees and they had no idea what the quality of their coffee is. Nor do they receive any technical assistance on how to improve the coffee, nor did they have an access to a better market paying higher prices for those coffees. And that's also partly the reason why Mexico in general as a producing country is maybe not so recognized as producing high quality lots. Because usually the great coffees that there are often lost in those blends that are made in the regions without any prior quality control. Through quality control, we want on the one hand connect producers with roasters and establish long-term relationships with roasters that pay higher prices to ensure producers have a higher income, and at the same time give technical assistance to help producers increase production and improve quality as well. So the goal behind that is to also motivate young people that have the tendency to migrate to the cities or to the US, but rather motivate them and give an example that coffee production can actually be profitable, and that can be quality of life in the countryside. Now, the only way to provide that, in our opinion, is to give access to the better market, to connect with roasters paying better prices, and at the same time giving technical assistance. And we cup all the coffees that we receive this year. For example, it was around 3,000 samples in individual lots, which sounds like a massive volume, but it only represents some 11 containers, which is not a massive volume. And we analyze those pretty thoroughly and look at not only the cup score, but also appearance of the parchment, of the quality of the green coffee, uniformity of drying. We look at the coffee under UV light, water activity, etc. And we take into consideration all those different factors that often represent the work that producers put into the production of those coffees, often even more than the quality, than the cup score itself. And the price we pay to the producers, yes, it depends on the cup score, but not only. We also take into consideration those other factors. For us, it's very important that the coffee has a good shelf life as well. For example, a coffee that scores 87, which is a really high score, but ages very fast or very quickly and loses that quality, for us is not worth more than a very solid 85 that is going to maintain that quality over a long time. So that's why we strongly believe that it's important to take into consideration those other factors as well in the payment. So the payment is based around, it's a pretty complex Excel sheet where we store all the information that we gather during the process of QC. And that same Excel sheet on the one hand is linked to the pricing calculator, calculating individual prices for each lot. And on the other hand, it's also linked to a feedback sheet that the producers receive.
It's pretty huge or laborious way of working, because if you have 3,000 lots to score and then grade, determine pricing of, and then give also feedback to every individual producer, that sounds like an enormous amount of work.
It is. Luckily, the feedback sheet has become a big passion of my partner, Sean. So that is great. He put an endless amount of effort into that sheet, so that's become really great. It is a lot of work. At the same time, we believe it's the only way, and that it's very rewarding. Finally, after several years we've been working in Oaxaca since 2017, and we finally see some results. That's something that took a lot longer in Mexico than it would in some other regions, because as the production is so small, it's like the whole concept of quality is very new to the producers, right? Of different cup scores, etc. People have always been paid the same price, regardless of the quality. Their coffees were always blended with their neighbors' coffees and all that. So there was never really much motivation to produce a higher quality.
Yeah.
There was no incentive.
So you see the average cup score go up year by year?
We see some producers put some effort into processing. They put into practice some of the recommendations that we give in terms of fermentation or drying of the coffees. From a quality perspective, we're very lucky that in Oaxaca, most of the varieties grown, at least in the higher regions we work in, are still the traditional old varieties, such as typica, Borbón, Caturra. There's not so much of the new Timor hybrids that's rust resistant. But now it's even more so. We see that the producers are even more interested in continuing with or convinced to continue with the old varieties. They see they offer a higher quality, and that's translated into a higher price. We finally have a team, a very solid team that go and constantly visit the producers in the different regions and give technical assistance.
How many are in the team, the local team?
During the harvest, 5 people, and year-round 4 people.
Okay, then maybe can you tell us something specific about Elox, where the coffee we have on Easy Rider is from, and what the coffees in this region taste like, or what we can expect taste-wise?
Sure. Elox is the first town we started working in the Mazateca region, and the Mazateca region as such being an extremely remote and very mystical region, which geographically is very interesting, very extreme. It has like massive cliffs and drops of over 1,000 meters that leads to a very unique microclimate in the region. There's many producers that's the Mazateco community, and many producers actually don't speak Spanish, which is a big challenge, of course, for us. Production is even smaller than it is in many of the other regions in Oaxaca. It's also grown completely on the forest, which characterizes coffee production in Oaxaca in general. We can't speak of shade grown. This is proper forest grown. Try to find an Oaxacan coffee field on Google Maps or satellite maps. You won't find one because it's all on the forest. So this is very valuable, but yes, you mentioned it's the production is very low. Per hectare yield is very low. And that is even more so, that is the case in the Mazateca region. So the Elox blend is a blend that we compose in the lab. Many coffees that score 85 points and higher from the town of Elox de Flores Magón. That's where the name comes from. Elox means the valley of the flower of the corn. Yeah, so it's very small producers. The coffees tend to have a profile that is red fruits, a bit of almonds, raisins. Yeah, it's more on that side.
So how many producers contribute to the Elox blend?
So the Elox blend, in this case, it's 42 individual producers whose coffees went into that blend.
And we're talking average farm size, like 1 hectare.
It's a little bit bigger. Actually, farm size is not so much a restrictive factor. And average farm size is somewhere around 2 hectares. But in theory, there is a lot more land available that producers also have access to. Land is communal owned in Oaxaca. It's not private. And if they wanted to cultivate more, there is so much more land available. The problem is that the production per hectare is so dramatically low. There's one producer in the Mazateca that once visited us in the first year we started working there. She brought us, we set up a little lab there in the town, in Elox actually. She brought us her sample. We cupped her sample and we said, you don't have to bring us such a big sample. We only need 300 grams. Turned out to be her lot, not the sample. It was a bag of 4 kilos. That was her lot. That's an exception, but it's in the Mazateca. It's common to have lots of 10, 15, 20, 30 kilos. So in this case, some average lot size in that case is somewhere around 40 kilos of parchment.
Do they grow other stuff?
So coffee is usually the only income, but they usually grow a bunch of fruit, citrus fruits, bananas, corn, and frijol beans, chilies. They grow a lot, but for own consumption.
And they have no other income, like apart from agriculture, they don't?
Most of them don't, no. That is one of the very limiting factors. I was saying before that it is a very slow process in Oaxaca to see the change, because we also work in Peru a little bit, and average farm size is very similar, but production is maybe 10 times as high. Not quite, but at least 5 times as high. The problem in Oaxaca is even if we pay 3 times as much as the local market price, which often we do, then in absolute figures, if a producer only produced 50 kilos, that's of course not so much additional income. So it doesn't suddenly allow you to invest so much into a bigger wet mill or to suddenly cultivate another couple of hectares of coffee, right? It's a very slow process. But it's nice to see that finally something is happening.
And do you also see that in farmers taking up more land to grow more because they know that they can get more per, not necessarily the yield, but they can get higher prices for everything they can produce?
Last year we took a group of young producers from the Mazateca. We took them to the group of Unión San Pedro in the Sierra Sur, where producers grow coffee very similarly, but they produce their own organic fertilizer. They have different techniques of stumping or pruning, and they've reached production that is significantly higher. The goal is not to reach an average production as it is in Colombia, for example, but it's somewhere in between. Some producers produce around 15 bags per hectare. That's of parchment. Ecologically, it's still same as sustainable because it's still grown in very complex, diverse forest. But at the same time, economically, it's more sustainable there too.
I think those were all my questions. Thanks so much for doing this, and we're very happy to have this coffee back, and we really look forward to making it an annual fixture and have it come back every year. So it's great to share a little bit more about Mexico and Elox with all our customers.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Happy to hear that, because that is our goal, right? To just the long-term relationships. That's the best scenario for us and the producers. So yeah, thank you for having us.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.